with the windows done, all I've just done there is slotted it on the side. This is not glued in at all, just ledged in, because the next part we want to be doing is to fit your depot fronts to the front here, and all I'm going to do is just utilize this end piece here to make sure that when I fit this part and fit it into place, I've got as level end as possible on one side. Whether you're going to get it level on both sides, it all depends on the thickness of the MDF. As I've always mentioned, MDF thickness on certain items can vary, and this is a 1mm piece of MDF, and the majority of the time it's 1.2mm. So all I'm going to do is make sure that it is flush. If I can just flush down here in the middle, so it's flush around the doors. And what I've got is I've got a couple of little bits of MDF, and I shall most probably just pick them in there and hold them to make sure that it's correct. And then I'll just most probably then just put my finger along the side to see whether I've got a level edge. It won't be the end of the world if it's slightly out. We can always do weathering on these to make it look so, but our main priority is getting the door openings correct. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue on the back here. I might use the glue and glaze on this one because that will allow me just to move it slightly. It's a little bit thicker, so you don't need to put as much on. I need a few dabs here and there. This isn't going anywhere, and then you can adjust it on here, or you might actually even find it's easier to glue on the skeleton frame. It's entirely up to you, but we'll have a go and I'll come back and show you when I've done mine. So we've done one end, and all we need to do now is to replicate it on the other end. Right, moving on to what is most probably going to be the trickiest part of this build, and it's actually fitting this cladding to the side. You think this is going to be quite straightforward, but it's a little bit tricky. We've got the window ledges, and obviously they stick through about 4mm, so obviously we can't get a flush surface, so we want it to be tilted at an angle. So I've just got a couple of offcuts of MDF, and I've just put them on the end, so the side panel is at an angle, so we've got a chance to then add this cladding. Now the cladding, if it's not glued, I'll just move it out of the way for a minute. Let's try and do this one-handed while holding the phone. So we need to have some kind of ridge here that will stop this cladding from moving. I've just got another piece of MDF. I'm hoping if I stick it along the side of this ridge, I've got a slight height difference, so I can then add some glue to the back of the cladding and stick it in position. Now the cladding needs to be right on the edge and level with your red brickwork at the top, and obviously it needs to go above the windows. Now at each end we need the cladding to stick out one hole basically. So if we try and line it up, so if I try and get in a bit closer, you can see there's one whole gap there, and if I go to the other end, there's one whole gap there. Might be just wants to go over slightly. Now there will be a little bit of aluminium foil that you can cover over this, but this is going to be the trickiest part, is actually getting this glued and positioned, because it's extremely thin. I think it's 0.5, and there's holes galore to look like a bit of cladding. So how are we going to glue this? All I'm going to do is I'm going to obviously tip it upside down, and I'm going to use my dabbing method and just dab it here and there all the way along, just so it gets some adhesion to the back of the cladding. I'm then going to try and fit it on here. Now I'm going to use the Deluxe Materials glue and glaze on this one because it will dry clear, although you can still see it, but I will go over it with a slightly damp brush to try and get rid of any glue that might come through. But I'm hoping that just by adding bits along, it will stick in place, because then what I'm going to do, once that's dried, I'll mask over the windows and the red brickwork, and I'll matte varnish over the cladding, which hopefully then will seep in through the holes. I'm not going to put too much on, but it will stick and allow it to dry in position. So this is the part that you really got to take your time on, and making sure that we try and get it to fit exactly over your grey panel that you did. So we'll have a go at that and then we'll see how we get on. So that's just basically all the little bits of glue I've dabbed, and obviously also make sure that you've got the thickest part of the cladding at the top rather than the bottom, so that will then, top part will go up this end, the smaller piece down this end. So remember that when you come to glue it on. Right, so we seem to have some success on this. It's very, very fiddly to do. I've most probably got it 0.1 of a mil too high at this end, but we're not going to worry about that. My main concern is to try and get the same amount each end, and to make sure that you've got a brick layer above the windows. It should look good. And all I've done is I've got this very, very thin brush, damped it, and I've literally gone inside, been very careful how I do it, just to get rid of any excess glue. I didn't put much on it, so it's not going to go anywhere. This is our model board. It's really good, and it's stuck on down there, and by the time I've then masked this up and varnished that ain't going to go anywhere. So all I'm going to do now is replicate that on the other panel that we need to do, and I'll come back and show you when I've done that. Right, so they're both done, and actually the second one went on a lot better than the first one. Got that one spot on. So just the biggest tip is taking your time on this. You only really get one crack at it, although I did manage to not quite get it level at the beginning, and I managed to pull the strip off. You just got to be careful because it's really thin, although it's flexible. I think I did break one of the struts here, so but once it's glued on, you'll never know. So just take your time. And obviously our next job is to glue these now to the skeleton frame. Now the depot door packs that come with this obviously have the doors that will go on the outer and inner side of the door, so you can paint those. If you don't want to use those and have a sort of like a recess, I have engraved the lines of the doors into the skeleton frame. So if that's the case and you don't want to add the doors, then you need to paint that area. So obviously when you put your brickwork on, it looks as though it's a coloured door. So I might just paint those black just to see what it looks like, and then I'll decide whether to do the doors. Most probably will do, to be honest. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll quickly paint both the skeleton doors on both sides black, allow it to dry, so maybe about 10 or 15 minutes. Lovely sunny day, warm day today in the office. So we'll do that, and then we can think about gluing these to the frames. So I've painted those doors black. Didn't have to be straight, just covers the area. The next thing we need to do is to fit the brick panel sides to the skeleton frame. Now I'm going to put the glue on the skeleton frame all the way around, and I'm also going to add some glue on the top lip of the frame as well, because obviously we've got our ledges and we want to make sure that they stick to these. Leave the base on while you do this. Make sure you've got a flat surface. Glue the skeleton frame and then gently slot it in. And then what you might have to do once you've got it in position is then quickly take the base off, and then underneath, put your fingers underneath and push down on the ledges to secure them to the brickwork. Sounds complicated, but it's not. But you need to keep the base on first to make sure that you've got it in the correct position. So I'm going to add the glue, and on this one I'm going to use the very thin superphatic glue. Glue and glaze is a little bit too thick for this one. We want to try and get the MDF to line up with the sides as well. Don't want too much thick glue, so really thin glue all the way along, and then on the edges stick it in place, and then take the base off and then push them down and secure it in place. I will come back and show you once this side is done, just so you can see what I mean. And there you go, there's the glue. Now it's obviously starting to go off quite quickly already, so you need to work really quickly on this, and obviously remember to add the glue on the inner edges of that as well. So I'm going to stick that back in position. I'm going to put this back down, stick it in position, take the base off, and then fit them together, and I'll come back and show you. So I've just added a piece of kitchen towel because obviously I don't want to be getting dust and marking the outside brickwork, and obviously taking the base off, and then obviously you've got your ledges, and all I'm doing is pinching it as I go along. This glue soon sets, so then you should have your ledges right on top of your internal breeze blocks with a small little lip. Not the end of the world if it's not, but I think design these just so you should have a small little overlap as a ledge, and then obviously then you can get to the stage where you can add tiny little items that you could fit on the windowsills if you want to. Not that I will be doing that, it's obviously at N gauge, it's not my size layout that I'd model in, but you can do that. And obviously we've got room for the internal doors, which we do need to do, and obviously you can cut those out of your sprue, paint them, and obviously fit them. Now obviously the inner ones are slightly smaller than the outer ones, purely because we've lost this base ridge, so it's the ones on the right hand side which are smaller, then you can fit them in, but I'll be doing that later on. My main concern is to get these brickwork on, the ledges sat on the brickwork nicely, and it's all going to dry, so I will then go on and do the other side. Now you may find obviously when you're gluing that side panel on that it's finding it difficult to stick, because the glue does dry fairly quickly, but it's still tacky, and obviously we've concentrated on getting those ledges fitted. So all I've done, got some scrap pieces of MDF because I don't want to damage the cladding, and it's okay this side because obviously it's only the hexagon frame and that's model board, so that's okay. And all I've done is I've used these tiny little mini clamps. I think I bought this off Amazon for a £5 for about 10, and just hold that in place while it glues. And just want to double check that the bottom of the brickwork is glued as well, which I've checked that has. So if it hasn't, you could always pop it up on its side like so and add clamps down this side as well, but it looks like it's glued quite nicely to the bottom. So I'm going to allow that side to dry, then I'll come back and do the other side. Now that we've completed the exterior brickwork, we need to fit the doors, and obviously they form part of the door pack. They are held on by little tags, so you just need to cut them out, but you might find you can just push them out like I did, but then just get the sandpaper at the ends and just lightly sand them off. I'm going to then paint these and then just fit them in, and obviously you've got the larger ones for the outside, smaller ones for the inside. Don't need to prime these, you find the acrylic paints go to this quite nicely. Paint them in the colour of your choice and then glue them in. So that's what I'm going to do, give these a coat of paint. I'm most probably going to do them black, and then I'll fit them in place. As you can see from the video, the doors have been painted black. Just used a black acrylic from the game, I just used that one, seem to have that to hand. Any black acrylic would do, allowed it to dry, and then a little dab of glue on the back and they're in place. I've done exactly the same, painted the black door inside just to give it a different tone of colour, to be honest. And obviously if I turn it around, that is duplicated on the other side, so that's that completed. We go back to the roof. Now the way that we've designed it so your glazing fits in this template that goes over the top, when you slot it over your roof and fit it in position, it actually lodges in place, so you don't actually need to glue it on. And there may be some of you that might just want to fill your depot with all nice bits and have it on display. Now if that's the case, then what I'd recommend is that you paint your roof cross members grey, which I'm going to do. Obviously I left them blank, not painted, because we were originally going to glue these in position. If you are gluing them in position, then you don't need to paint them, and obviously then just glue it, make sure that it latches in either end, and you should find it's slightly smaller than the whole length, because obviously we're adding a end capping over the edges, Now if you're going to show your roof, then you won't be able to put those on, but you might be able to come up with a solution that you can have half a capping that slots over the side so it hides the join. The only thing it won't hide is obviously the roof apex, but if you're going to glue it, then there's an apex covering that will cover that. So I'm just going to go and paint the cross members grey just to blend them in, because I'll probably leave this roof off unless James decides that, because it's going on an N-gauge demo layout, that he just wants the roof glued on. And obviously you can put your depot doors in position if you want to. You've got your full ones and your part ones to do as well. You can glue them in place or put a little bit of black tack inside and just hold them, so you can change it if you want to. Right, so I'm going to paint the cross members grey and allow that to dry before we move on to the next part. And while I paint my cross members grey, I've detached it from the base. Don't really want any grey paint falling on the base. That looks nice as it is, don't want to ruin it. So take your base off if you're going to be painting your cross members. So having painted the cross members, obviously I've had to do this by hand because obviously they were glued in, and all I did was get my Halford's grey primer, spray some of it into the can lid at an angle so it didn't blow everywhere, and I've just used a brush and brushed over it. I think I've gone over it twice. Blends in quite nicely when it's dry, so that allows us then to keep the roof off and showcase any locos we have inside. Again, like I said earlier, if you don't want to keep the roof off and you're going to glue it on, then you don't need to paint those.